The Arizona Biltmore Hotel opened in Phoenix in February 1929, designed by Albert Chase McArdle under the acknowledged influence of Frank Lloyd Wright, whose geometric textile block construction methodology and prairie school aesthetic vocabulary defined every element of the building's architectural expression, from the concrete block facades to the ornamental details of the public rooms. Wright's influence on the Biltmore has been a subject of architectural historical debate for decades, with the consensus acknowledging his significant collaborative role, while attributing formal design credit to McArdle as the architect of record. The attribution question is less forensically significant than the outcome. The building looks like a Frank Lloyd Wright building, has been marketed as a Frank Lloyd Wright-influenced building for nearly a century, and has commanded the specific premium that association produces in the Arizona luxury hospitality market. The forensic entry point is the most recent major acquisition of the Arizona Biltmore. Placement under the Waldorf Astoria brand flag through a private equity-backed ownership structure that produced the specific interaction between institutional architectural significance and debt-financed luxury hospitality that Case File 061's analytical framework identifies as the private equity grand hotel acquisition model's primary vulnerability. The Waldorf Astoria brand requires operational standards that a global luxury hospitality organization has developed across dozens of properties in dozens of markets. Those standards are designed to be scalable. The consistency that makes the Waldorf brand valuable to the traveler who chooses it in New York, Paris, or London requires that the brand's physical and service standards be replicable across every property in the portfolio. The Arizona Biltmore was designed by an architect whose entire philosophical framework was the rejection of replication, standardization, and the subordination of specific architectural expression to generic functional requirements. The building is specific. The brand is scalable. Those two facts are in structural tension, and the history of the Arizona Biltmore's successive ownership structures is in significant part the history of how that tension has been managed, deferred, and in some cases ignored by ownership entities whose acquisition thesis required the building to function as a Waldorf Astoria hotel. If this is your first case file from this channel, subscribe now, because every episode adds one more layer to what you are about to understand about the architecture of institutional failure. The Arizona Biltmore's ownership history, across its nearly century of operation, reflects the pattern this channel has documented across multiple historic hotel case files. Successive ownership transitions, each extracting value from the architectural significance, while deferring the physical investment required to maintain the competitive standard that significance implies. The Biltmore was acquired by William Wrigley Jr. in 1930, 1 year after its opening, when the original developer's financial difficulties produced a sale that Wrigley executed at a price reflecting the property's distressed position rather than its architectural significance. The Wrigley family's ownership through the mid-20th century was characterized by the specific stewardship model that long-term family ownership of institutionally significant properties sometimes produces. A commitment to physical maintenance and institutional identity that financial return maximization alone would not justify, sustained by the family's separate financial capacity and by the specific cultural capital that ownership of a property of this significance provides. The post-Wrigley ownership history has been characterized by the pattern that case file DOA X1's analytical framework documents as the private equity grand hotel acquisition model's signature. A series of acquisitions at prices reflecting the architectural premium, followed by debt structures whose service requirements created capital investment constraints, followed by competitive position erosion, followed by sale or restructuring at prices reflecting the degraded position. The covenant that each successive ownership structure after the Wrigley family did not read carefully enough was the one embedded in the relationship between the Arizona Biltmore's architectural specificity and the operational requirements of the luxury hospitality brands whose flags successive owners have attached to the property. The Biltmore's concrete textile block construction, designed in 1929 and not renovated to contemporary luxury standards, resists the systematic upgrade to current luxury brand specifications that a Waldorf Astoria or comparable brand affiliation requires. The renovation investment required to bring the property to Waldorf standards is substantially higher than the equivalent renovation investment for a property built with contemporary construction methods, because the textile block architecture requires specialized restoration rather than standard renovation. The specialized restoration cost is the specific physical expression of the tension between the building's architectural specificity and the brand's operational standardization. At what point does the maintenance of an architecturally specific property's competitive relevance require renovation investment incompatible with any debt structure that an acquisition at the property's institutional premium could support? Leave your analysis in the comments below. The appraisal methodology governing the Arizona Biltmore's most recent major acquisition reflected the specific challenge of valuing a property whose architectural significance produces a market premium that conventional hospitality appraisal methodology can observe in the transaction price, but cannot trace to specific operating performance characteristics that would survive a change in the property's physical condition. The Waldorf Astoria affiliation provides a brand premium that the acquisition financing required. The ability to project post-acquisition rev pair consistent with the Waldorf brand's competitive set rather than with the Arizona Biltmore's standalone historical performance in the Phoenix luxury market. The challenge embedded in that projection is the one case file 061's analytical framework identifies as the private equity grant hotel acquisition model's foundational appraisal failure. The pro forma projects the efficiency improvements achievable through brand affiliation and cost optimization without quantifying their impact on the architectural premium whose maintenance the rev pair projection assumes. The Arizona Biltmore's architectural premium is specifically vulnerable to the operational standardization that Waldorf Astoria brand management requires, because the building's specificity is the source of the premium and standardization is the antithesis of specificity. A traveler who chooses the Arizona Biltmore because of its Wright-influenced architecture and its specific historical character is not choosing the Waldorf Astoria brand experience. They are choosing the building. The brand affiliation provides a reservation platform and a loyalty program. It does not provide the architectural authenticity that the premium reflects. When operational standardization reduces the building's specific character in the name of brand consistency, the premium narrows because the travelers who are paying the premium for the building's specificity find that the standardization has made the building less specific and therefore less worth the premium. The renovation investment required to maintain the building's architectural authenticity while achieving the Waldorf brand's physical standards is the specific cost that the appraisal's pro forma must incorporate to produce a debt service coverage ratio projection that accurately reflects the sustainable rev pair the property can achieve. That renovation investment figure, in the Arizona Biltmore's case, is substantially larger than the equivalent figure for a property of comparable market position, whose physical characteristics are less architecturally specific and whose renovation therefore involves standard luxury hospitality upgrade rather than specialized historic restoration. If the forensic analysis this channel conducts is changing how you read real estate headlines, the like button is how the algorithm knows to send this case file to the next analyst who needs it. The Arizona Biltmore has navigated multiple ownership transitions and multiple renovation cycles across its nearly century of operation, maintaining competitive relevance in the Phoenix luxury hospitality market through a combination of the architectural premium's durability and successive ownership investments that have managed, with varying degrees of success, the tension between the building's specificity and the brand's standardization requirements. The specific institutional denial embedded across the Biltmore's ownership history is not the denial of the renovation investment requirement. Each successive owner has acknowledged that the property requires continuous renovation investment to maintain competitive relevance. The denial is in the acquisition pricing, the consistent acquisition at premiums that reflect the architectural significance without adequate provision for the renovation investment required to maintain that significance through the operating period. The premium gets priced into the acquisition. The renovation cost gets deferred into the operating period. The operating period produces a revenue stream insufficient to service the acquisition debt and fund the renovation simultaneously. The covenant breach follows. The pattern is the same pattern that Case File 061's analytical framework documents as the private equity Grand Hotel acquisition model's predictable outcome. The Arizona Biltmore's architectural specificity makes the pattern's execution more expensive and more visible than in cases where the Grand Hotel's institutional significance is rooted in historical associations rather than in specific physical characteristics, whose maintenance requires specialized and costly restoration. A hotel whose significance is historical can maintain the significance through narrative and association even as the physical plant deteriorates. A hotel whose significance is architectural cannot. The building is the significance. When the building deteriorates, the significance deteriorates with it. The Arizona Biltmore's current ownership, operating under the Waldorf Astoria flag, following a significant renovation investment, is attempting to sustain the premium through the combination of architectural restoration and brand affiliation that the property's competitive position requires. Whether that combination is sustainable at the acquisition price and debt structure that the current ownership represents is the specific question that the rev-pair trajectory of the post-renovation operating period will eventually answer. The building has survived nearly a century of ownership transitions, financial crises, and renovation cycles. Frank Lloyd Wright's influence is still visible in the concrete textile blocks. The question of whether it is a Waldorf Astoria hotel or an Arizona Biltmore that carries the Waldorf name has not been definitively resolved by any of the ownership structures that have attempted to answer it. The next ownership transition will attempt the answer again. The Arizona Biltmore continues to operate in Phoenix as one of the most architecturally significant resort properties in American hospitality, under the Waldorf Astoria flag, following a significant recent renovation whose investment reflects the current ownership's judgment that architectural restoration and brand standardization are compatible at the level the property's market position requires. What the Arizona Biltmore case reveals in the context of this channel's 62 case archive is the specific complication that architectural significance adds to the private equity Grand Hotel acquisition pattern documented in Case File 061. When the institutional premium is rooted in specific physical characteristics, the renovation investment required to maintain the premium is a structural operating requirement whose deferral produces visible premium erosion across a single ownership cycle. The case connects to the Chrysler building in Case File 0122, where architectural significance produced premium valuations unsupported by operating cash flows, and to the AT&T building in Case File 036, where architectural specificity complicated successive ownership's adaptation of the property to contemporary requirements without compromising the premium source. The distinguishing characteristic of the Arizona Biltmore is that its architectural significance has been maintained through active hospitality operation across nearly a century, rather than through the passive landmark status that protects buildings whose primary users are office tenants. A landmark office building sustains significance through preservation without active renovation calibrated to guest experience standards. A luxury hotel cannot. The guests whose rev-PR generates the premium require a physical standard whose maintenance demands continuous investment compatible with the debt structure the premium's acquisition price created. The Biltmore has been navigating that specific incompatibility for 95 years. Each ownership structure has attempted the resolution. Each has discovered that the resolution requires more renovation capital than the debt structure allowed, or more operating time than the holding period provided. If this case file changed how you evaluate architectural significance as a hospitality debt structure variable, subscribe, because the next case examines a building whose significance was insufficient to survive its own construction process. And in the comments, given the Biltmore's documented acquisition premium and renovation cost pattern, what specific ownership structure is most compatible with the long-term maintenance of an architecturally significant resort whose renovation requirements exceed what conventional hospitality debt structures support? The case file is open. The right influence is still in the concrete blocks. The ownership question is still in the debt structure. Both outlast every acquisition thesis that attempts to resolve them independently. This content was developed using artificial intelligence tools as part of the research, writing, and production process. All AI-generated material was subject to human review, editorial intervention, and approval before publication. Factual claims, interpretive framing, creative direction, and final content decisions reflect human judgment throughout. This disclosure is provided in accordance with platform transparency standards for AI-assisted content.